Capitalism is the concentration of resources in the hands of a few. It's a worldwide economics and social system of organizing production and trade by private enterprise. Socialism, instead, is a communal system of management of resources that takes into consideration the needs of the many. By communal system, we intend a system where the majority of the society decides the allocation of resources within the society itself. The term socialism was first used in the 1830s by Comte de Saint-Simon, the father of French socialism. Capitalism embraces the freedoms of the individual as a key value. Socialism instead obliges the single individual to the needs of the many. The biggest socialist experiment took place in Russia in 1917 and lasted until the 31st December 1991 with the dismantlement of the United Socialist Soviet Republics, the USSR. The most successful experiment in socialism took place in China, thanks to the adoption of a mixed capitalist socialist system from the late 1970s, thanks to the reforms introduced by Deng Xiaoping, bringing China to a period of perduring economic growth. Capitalism is older than socialism. The economist Adam Smith, in his book An Inquiry into the Nature of the Wealth of Nations, stated that capitalism first took place in the 16th century, whilst instead socialism was considered by philosophers from the 1830s onwards, as we saw, with the real social experiments taking place during the 20th century and perduring up to this very day in various countries. The best example of capitalist states are the Anglo-Saxon countries, the United States of America and Great Britain. Other European countries that are part of the Western world have adopted a mixture between capitalism and socialism, some countries favoring the capitalistic approach, some countries favoring the socialistic approach. The countries which have achieved the best successes are the Nordic countries, Sweden, Finland, Norway. The Scandinavian countries are those that actually have obtained the best results with a mixture between the socialistic and the capitalistic system, favoring the socialistic. But what are the reasons against socialism and in favor of capitalism? Up to now, pure socialistic experiments have economically failed, from Cuba to the United Socialist Soviet Republics, and the mixed experiments have brought to economic mismanagement, with the sole exception that of the Scandinavian countries. Public debt in China is around 289.7%. It's excessive and risks getting out of hand. Other countries that have adopted socialist practices have seen their public debt grow substantially, which is a sign of non-sustainability of the system itself. The second reason against socialism and in favor of capitalism is that capitalism is quick to correct itself due to competition, while the public system on which socialism bases itself can be slow in fixing flaws and problems. Not only there, where a mistake is made in the process of correction, disaster can ensue. The issue is that socialism is based on a central element which takes decision. What happens if the central element makes a mistake in taking the decisions that should repair an issue or should solve a problem? Capitalism instead is based on a myriad of small players, each one which tries to find a solution. Some will succeed and some will fail. Those will fail will disappear. Those that succeed will bring a solution to society and will prosper, thanks to the idea of competition and profit. The third argument in favor of capitalism and against socialism is that bureaucracies and public-owned institutions traditionally give a worse service to their clients than private-owned enterprises. How many of us have had to face the problematics and the difficulties which are placed by bureaucrats when seeking public papers necessary to do this or to do that? In a socialist system, the bureaucrat simply does not have the incentive to cater to the single citizen, to the client. Thus, the single citizen will find sometimes enormous difficulties to obtain what is rightfully his right within the system itself. instead of there being a constant process of correction, which is typical of the private capitalistic system, which is based on competition and constant fighting in order to obtain a position of preeminence, the public system based on a socialistic philosophy ideology will seek reforms and reviews only when certain conditions are met, not when there is the need, but when the conditions are met, and quite often the conditions are crisis, major problematics, rather than a flow of constant re-examination of the situation in order to improve, which is typical of a privatistic system where it is required in order to survive within the environment. Competition leaches out complacency. In a socialistic system, there is no competition. For that reason, a capitalistic system is to be favored. The fourth reason that we present here that is against socialism and in favor of capitalism is that the dreams of the single individuals within a socialist system are put aside, bringing to the non-exploration of ideas and possibilities, which leads to the less diversity of products produced by the system itself. Since everything is centralized, since the decision of using resources is centralized, the single individual cannot decide to deviate from the decisions of the majority. It is the deviation from the decisions of the majority that leads to inventiveness and new products. For that reason, within a socialistic system, there is a less diversity of possibilities explored, simply because deviations are not possible outside the system. Now let us consider the reasons in favor of socialism. The first reason is quite obvious. Socialism takes care of the weakest and poorest elements of society, quite often with pension schemes and handouts, which are then used by the individuals to cater to their own needs. Socialism identifies a need of the weak and the poor, and then sets up the infrastructure necessary to cater to that need. The problem is fitting that infrastructure into the broader economic system so that the whole system becomes viable and the need is satisfied without harming the overall organism. The second reason in favor of socialism is it takes care of issues of society not covered by the private sector. An example are rare illnesses that touch a limited number of people and have no economic interest to be pursued. Socialism will cover the costs necessary to pursue even the rarest of illnesses that touch only a small percentage of the population. The third reason in favor of socialism is it takes care of issues disregarded by society, like for example the environment, which tends to be non-considered and exploited by the private sector. It's socialism which puts the laws which limits the private sector. It's socialism which taxes the private sector so to intervene in the environment, fixing the problematics of pollution. The fourth reason in favor of socialism is that it pursues the purposes of societies as one bloc, ignoring divisive opposition and summoning enormous resources to reach the purposed objectives. When something has to be achieved, socialism simply pours more and more and more and more resources until the objective is achieved. Not only the concentration of effort permits economies of scale and synergies that facilitate the obtaining of the objective itself. A perfect example is the railway infrastructure in China, where enormous resources were poured by the socialistic system to quickly pursue the upgrading of the system so to facilitate high-speed trains that connect one area of the country with another. Once reasons for and reasons against have been considered, it is necessary to arrive to a conclusion. Which system should we adopt? Well, the main problem of the capitalistic system is that it ignores key issues, like for example the environment, but it has good management, it has adaptation, it has resilience, it quickly changes to mutated circumstances, whilst instead the socialistic system is slow and ponderous, and can make some tragic mistakes, wasting an enormous amount of resources, giving also poor quality goods. For these simple reasons, one can say that one should favor the capitalistic system, but since the capitalistic system has flaws, there's reason to say that the ideal system is a capitalistic system with socialistic correction elements. So one has a basic system which is capitalistic, which is adaptive, which is quick, which is resilient, but then the problems, the failures of the capitalistic system are corrected by socialistic elements, by a central government that has punctual intervention, minimal punctual intervention, to secure that the main flaws of the capitalistic system do not ruin society and do not create too much problematics to the lower echelons of the community. The main reason why the intervention of government has to be minimal is that too much intervention leads to growth of the mismanagement element, which is typical of socialistic societies. Thus, in order to maintain the flexibility of the capitalistic system, the socialistic element, which is prone to mismanagement, has to be kept to a minimum. Well, that is the conclusion of today. Please check the channel to see if there are any videos that you might consider to be of interest. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye bye, see you soon.